so much for being here at the DCU Center for the WBJ's Business of Cannabis Forum. My name is Matt. I'm an account executive with the WBJ, and I'll be introducing this breakout session. So, your topic in here is, Are We Really Green? A look at the environmental impacts of cannabis cultivation and sustainability. On your panel today, Noni Goldman, CEO of Four Trees Management Company. Michael Markarian, CEO, Contempo Specialty Packaging. Sam Milton, Principal, Climate Resources Group. And Scott Richardson, AIA, Lead AP, Principal, Co-founder, GRLA, and a whole bunch of other letters. Let's give a round of applause for our friend.
I like how this is already starting.
And you can keep clapping for your moderator now, who is Asia Atwood, CEO of Trella Technologies.
Welcome, everyone. Cannabis is a communal plant, so I always like to ask for more of a community discussion. So if anyone's in the back that would like to step forward and be more of the community, get a little closer so we can get a little bit more engaged, feel free in the back. Your bravery, sir.
Look at this leader.
Who else? A couple more brave souls. Actually, would someone mind closing that back door for me too? I would appreciate that very much. Thank you. Awesome. So my name is Asia Atwood. Yes, I am the CEO of Trella Technologies. I'm also an engineer, entrepreneur, cannabis advocate, cannabis patient, etc. A lot of people know me mainly for Trella Technologies. We developed a solution that trains a tall plant to grow sideways so that we can get taller varieties of plants indoors for the new environment that we're going to be experiencing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I want to set a little bit of a sense of urgency for this discussion for sustainability, and talk a little bit about why sustainability is important so that we understand why we're going through everything that we're going through right now. And then I'll let the panel introduce themselves and we'll get into the nooks and crannies of it. Some people don't know, but I'm also a natural catastrophe risk engineer, which means that I go around and I evaluate how bad will it be if there's a flood, hurricane, hailstorm, earthquake, etc. I've done this for over 15 years. I've developed some of the engineering standards for some of the top insurance carriers like Liberty Mutual, FM Global, AIG. So I've seen a lot. I've been out in the field. I see what happens after natural catastrophes. I'm responsible for trying to make sure that we can alleviate the damage and minimize it as much as possible. So I've worked with the municipal systems. I've seen the levy systems that we have. I've seen our infrastructure. And let me explain to you that I am woefully concerned about the state of our nation and the climate change that we're going to experience. We're talking about rising waters. We're talking about wildfires. We're not prepared for it. We haven't thought about it. And the cannabis industry right now is new to some extent. We have the ability to create new foundations so that we can build off of this. And I think it's very important that we don't build just because it's great for our bottom line, or that we're reducing energy costs because we want to be more efficient than our competitors. No, we need to think about the fact that we're supplying medicine for these people. We need to be sustainable for our businesses, but we need to be sustainable for our patients and our clients as well. So with that being said, that's a little bit about the why. Let's talk about the how and the what, and let the panel introduce themselves. Michael, you go first.
I'd be happy to. So my name is Mike Markarian. I'm with Contempo Specialty Packaging. So we're a packaging business that started in the fashion industry for 40 years. We've been in cannabis about 3 years now. And we're selling child-resistant packaging that's beautiful all over North America to many big LPs and big multi-state operators and also individual operators as well. And I'm honored to be on this panel. Thank you for inviting me, because sustainability and sustainable packaging is something very important to me. And what I hope to bring to this discussion is my very thesis on sustainable packaging, which, to allude to the same point, we don't have time for the games that have been played in the past, which are greenwashing games, which are, how can I look eco and have consumers think I'm eco without really looking at the environmental impact. So my mission is to take a truthful approach, and we're investing a lot of money and a lot of time into investigating all things sustainable packaging and tackling it in a number of creative ways. So I look forward to this discussion and hope to bring you guys some fresh perspectives, right? Not just repeat the same eco things that maybe you've heard before, but I hope to bring you guys a few key points that maybe change the way you think of things a little bit.
I'm Noni Goldman. I'm CEO of Four Trees Holyoke. We're opening up a cultivation and dispensary in Holyoke. We're also the social equity educators for cultivation. I also serve on the NCIA's Cannabis Cultivation Committee, and in that respect, I talk to growers all around the United States about ways that we can be more sustainable.
Great. Thanks, Noni. Hi, guys. Thank you, Asia, for doing this, and also big thanks to the WBJ for having this discussion, which I think is crucially important. Thank you all for coming out for this. My name is Sam Milton. I operate a consultancy called Climate Resources Group, and as the name might connote, I work towards helping companies and municipalities, have resources to run a more climate-friendly operation. In the context of the cannabis industry, my service offering is called Enlighten Your Grow, and I work directly with cultivators and stakeholders to kind of reduce the energy and environmental footprint of their operations. So we're really trying to bring the tools of the trade of the conventional commercial industrial world directly to cultivators, to make sure that at least there's a greater awareness and appreciation for what are some of the steps that folks can take to really have a better facility in terms of its operational performance, but also their at the end of the day their footprint. So we have a great discussion. Thank you so much. Pass it on to Scott.
Thank you, Asia and WBJ for organizing this. I'm principal and co-founder of an architectural firm. Been around for about 44 years. We've always had a keen interest in sustainable design. We carry that through our regular projects and look to carry that through into the grow facilities that we're working on. We all know that grow facilities use an enormous amount of power. Basically about 10 times as much as any normal office building, and so there are ways that we look at trying to design a better, more efficient and well-performing building envelope, as well as looking at what the systems are that are available and lighting systems that can be upgraded to make them less energy hogs. So look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. So let's start with Michael. Sustainable and I guess terms, the way that people use that word sustainable, specifically when it comes to packaging, because it's a very broad term, right? So what are the different types of sustainable packaging, and how would you define sustainable packaging? If you could give us a little more on
Big
that.
question. I'll get to that in a sec, but I'll pose a question to begin. If anyone could raise their hand, when I say what is sustainable packaging, if you feel like you could give a clear answer, or if it's just sort of this foggy thing. So just do a quick poll if anyone, you don't have to explain, so don't worry, but just if you'd raise your hand if you know. The one enlightened soul. All right, we got 3.
I have ideas.
All right, we got some enlightened souls. More than
The question was, is wood sustainable?
It's that term sustainable, which has been thrown around for so long. It's sort of a vague term, and
Yeah, I'll say.
so I'll get into the different kinds of sustainable packaging, because we get approached all the time with a lot of people that they want sustainable packaging, they see what's happening to the planet, they care about the environment, and they go, I want sustainable. So I say, what do you mean sustainable? Do you mean recyclable, biodegradable, compostable? No, I don't know, I just need it to be sustainable. So I think that's the beginning of the discussion, is defining what that is. And first recognizing that it is generally a vague term, that we all have to do a better job defining what it is. So you have recyclable products that are, can be recycled. You have products made from recycled product, post-consumer recycled, people say PCR. Then you have the renewable packaging. You see bioresins, compostable type packaging, hemp packaging, corn packaging, sugarcane packaging. You have reusable packaging, and some of these can overlap a little bit. And then you have additives that can make plastics or other packaging degrade faster, which is a lot of mixed research and mixed opinions on that. So I would say that the way to define sustainable packaging, there's this idea of what is circular and what is reducing waste, but I think that's just the first point to put on the table, that we need to kind of get clear, and I'm not saying I'm the one with the answer, of what we mean when we say sustainable. And the easiest way that I think about it is just take the truthful approach. your sustainable solution, you have to be able to see it through to where you can make a convincing argument that it's actually good for the environment. That is sustainable. Not just saying, ocean plastics, hemp, it's recyclable, so I guess it's good for the environment. Really thinking it through. That's the message that I'm communicating to people and that I want to communicate to you guys today.
I appreciate that, Mike. And I think even, for example, solar panels are great for getting us off fossil fuels, but they also have some waste issues as well. So are they really sustainable? That's one of those types of questions that are still out there. But moving on, Noni and Scott, maybe the two of you can talk to this a little bit. What's the reason for outdoor? Like, why do we have to, what's the reason we're indoor versus outdoor? Outdoor is obviously, like you said, a lot more sustainable. So what's the reason for having to go indoors? If you can share a little bit of that. Noni, if you want to start, and Scott will pass it on.
Sure. So one of the things that I do want to point out, I'm a grower, I'm a cultivator. So sustainability for us has many different facets. We like to also talk about regenerative agriculture. This is a long form way to get to the outdoor grow, but there are other ways to be sustainable, especially if you're a grower. You can talk about microbial additives, living soil, reclaiming your condensate to use back into your system. Specifically about outdoor grow, I love outdoor grows. This is a home grow state. Everyone should be growing outside. But from a commercial cultivation point of view, the difference between a home grow and a commercial cultivator is you have to always minimize your risks. And sometimes the municipality just doesn't let you be an outdoor grower. So if it is your business plan to be a grower, there are a lot of competing narratives that ultimately influence your decision. Outdoor growing is more sustainable, it just is because you're using the sun. But it's not always possible. And even if you are an outdoor grower, you can be a better regenerative outdoor grower. You can use rainwater collection, you can use Korean natural farming, so just a lot of different ways. But it's complicated. You can't just say I'm an outdoor grower and then go into business.
Great, Scott?
Yeah, so again, you're kind of comparing, say, a greenhouse environment to growing within a warehouse building or a building that's built without greenhouse roofs. Certainly your cost to grow in a greenhouse is probably 60–70% less than in a building. But the problem is you're going to lose a bigger part of your crop due to environmental conditions. But again, if you're growing that much more, you can afford that. Again, greenhouse growing on a large scale, you see in Canada, they've been set up for years. That's kind of their mode of operation. Locally, though, you see very few, if any, greenhouse grows. And then outdoors, we can't do that in Massachusetts because of all the other regulations relative to odors.
Yes,
Yeah, we can. I happen to run one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, talked with you before. Yeah. Okay. But again, on the energy side of it, certainly, yes, the outdoor or greenhouse is much more energy efficient. Again, if you can get the control of all the components, then that would be that's a big part. Hydroponics also would be a good way to again reduce your reduce your dependence on fertilizers. On soils, which again is a big part of what you could say reduce costs. So.
Thank you.
I'd like to actually jump in here too.
Sure, Sam, and then I'll give it back to you again.
Yeah, just on why do we grow indoors? I mean, I think it's basically a function of the fact that we've been operating with multiple priorities, for years in the regulatory space. So we look way back, when cannabis was illegal, everywhere basically. In order to grow at scale, you had to go indoors where nobody could see that you were growing. And even as fun as how solar really became one of the ways in which people could become greeners because they were using solar panels to limit their exposure to utilities. So we're seeing that still right now. I mean, Illinois, for example, just kind of rolled out their adult use program. In Illinois, you're not able to cultivate outdoors at all. There's just a prohibition on that. Thankfully, Massachusetts, there's folks I think are a little bit wiser to some extent. They allowed for outdoor grows, and even to a certain degree, have encouraged it by reducing some of the regulatory barriers to your outdoors. I think license fees might be lower for outdoors, perhaps. Correct me if I'm wrong. But there are some advantages, certainly. I think the regulatory barriers are a little lower for outdoor. But the industry is baked into kind of an indoor grow paradigm, and it'll change a little. But hopefully we can get more outdoor grow.
Yeah, and as we were preparing for this panel today, everyone kind of gave me a group of questions or some things that they wanted to make sure they got across to everybody in the audience. And Sam, one of yours was that Massachusetts has had some of the highest energy costs throughout the country. And do you think that cultivators in this state are doing enough to prepare for the rising cost of energy plus the falling prices of the product? So we're going in both directions.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Again, Massachusetts has some of the highest energy costs in the country, and I think there's been an awareness of that for a long time in other industry sectors, which is why also Massachusetts has some of the most supportive and innovative programs on the commercial industrial side, kind of supporting companies and businesses that want to reduce their energy use, especially around energy demand, which is kind of an interesting component of commercial industrial. Energy user. You've got the demand, which is a function of how much power you're drawing all at once, which that really in so many ways will drive what your energy costs really are. And those numbers, the rates for energy demand are going up and up. And this is something that most industries in Massachusetts know about. Most cultivators may not have that same level of exposure to. So I think one of the things that I'm seeing more and more is kind of that interaction with the outside service providers in the energy space, coming in and starting to kind of inform the cannabis industry. It hasn't been that for a long time. Since I've been kind of looking at this, there are a smattering of companies that are even willing to talk to cannabis cultivators and to cannabis stakeholders, but we're seeing that more and more, thankfully. And I'm hoping in the next couple of years, if not sooner, we'll see a more widespread embrace of these tools that can really help industry and company reduce their energy costs. Because as you saw this morning in one of the presentations in the keynote, that the costs are the commodity price for cannabis is going to go down quickly. So if you're banking on getting $2,000 a pound for your product, you can maybe sustain that for a few years, but it'll be a point at which even if you produce at that amount, you're going to go out of business once the wholesale price goes below that, and it will happen. So I just encourage my clients to prepare for that and get their operating costs as low as possible.
And that gets me into the whole LED industry, LED versus traditional lighting methods. There's been some pushback on that. I remember a few years ago when it first came out, I could hardly get anyone to tell me that an LED light would work. But now we're seeing some improvements. However, I think it was back in September, the administration changed some rules in regards to how we give lighting standards and energy reductions on lighting. And the LED industry is a little worried that change, that going back to the pre-Obama era of how we used to evaluate lights, will cause the LED technology industry to suffer a little bit. So if you guys could either talk about your experience with LED or what you might know about that industry, if it's going to be sustain this or et cetera.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit on that subject. So one of the classes that we teach as part of the social equity program, the basic cultivation class, is an overview of the licenses and the process of going for your own licensure. And one of the things that we talk about are the energy requirements for the licenses. So we talk about calculating the HLPD, the horticultural lighting power density, which is an average of your vegetative and your mother wattage, and then also your flowering wattage. And one of the things that we communicate is that you have to be, if you're above a tier 2, you have to be below 36 watts per square foot. So how do you calculate that? If you calculate the spread of your lights, and sometimes you just can't use HPS. You're using a lot of power, and you'll get in trouble with your licensure. So we really push for LEDs, and this is probably the first sustainability panel that I've seen without an LED rep, which is great. But I do love LEDs. We do special control trials with our LED partners. So not only is it better for your bottom line, they're also super fun to use. We do special control trials like what they do on the International Space Station. So I would say I love LEDs. I'm never going back to HBS.
All right. Anyone?
Yeah, again, LED technology has come a long way, and certainly the fixtures that you can get for the grow facilities are much more efficient. Granted, they're much more costly, but the return on it is just a couple of years, especially if you're going to do a retrofit. So I think that the LED is, you'll see more of that in more facilities.
But you're seeing, a real reluctance, I think, in a lot of growers to go there. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So I think there's technology evolves quickly, right? So there R&D cycles of lighting, and a lot of technologies are super quick. So folks who may have been burned 5 years ago by installing LEDs and thinking they could swap out an HID light for an LED and didn't get the results they wanted, have had that experience kind of stick with them. And I think a lot of folks who've been growing for a long time, they use the recipe. They've got the lights they like it. They have the HID they like, and really, it's HID is kind of the way that things have gone for a long time. So I think we need to kind of reduce some of the stigma, around technology and around innovation. And in Asia, I'm certain, you develop a very innovative product, and you're trying to get people to think, oh yeah, this is something I could actually use as a challenge. But same with any new technology. It takes that experience and to have the empirical data to share with folks. Say, listen, this really can work. And also just know how to use it.
Excellent. So we're going to do one more question for Michael, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A, so you guys can jump in on this as well. My question for sustainable packaging and trends, like what are you seeing things that people can do? I know at one of the dispensaries that I used to go to, we had a bag that I could use to put all my products in, and it had a nice, childproof kind of like zipper on it. And I was instructed to bring the bag back for a nice little rebate so I could save, and that was supposed to be part of their sustainable program. What do you think of that? And what other trends do you think were really helpful in regards to packaging and how we can reduce our waste?
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. I think that ties into reusable, which is one of the most sustainable options, right? You produce something, it has a purpose, and it lives on again and again. When you get into flower packaging directly, there's issues with reusing it because the package needs to be sterile. But when you talk about an exit bag, I think that's a good option. I think the biggest trend that I see happening, which I think will be good news to everyone in this room, and it comes to the center of what I'm looking to accomplish and lead, is that I think it will be necessary for brands to take a truthful approach to sustainable packaging. Because what I see happening is the consumer is quickly becoming very educated. I would give it 6 to 12 months, 18 at the most, before the average person you walk up to, whether they're passionate about this area or not, I think just about everyone is at least somewhat interested, because it is our earth after all that's at stake. They're going to know what compostable means. They're going to be able to spot BS versus something that actually makes sense. And there's a lot of brands that, to check off the sustainability box, they've gone down the path of greenwashing as opposed to what actually makes sense. So I think that's a trend that everyone should keep in mind as it pertains to your business, that as the consumer is becoming more educated, we need to make sure that we're actually doing what's right, which we should do anyways, but it's actually going to have a major backlash on your business if you don't. And the other trend that I see, just to be a little more concrete, is composting, in particular home composting. That's a trend that's on the rise, and there's a lot of packaging that we're experimenting with, which is home compostable. And the challenge becomes to make something home compostable and to perform at a high level, right? To have the right barrier properties to keep flower fresh, let's say. But that research is only continuing to develop. So I think home compostability and industrial, but home, and particularly in places like Hawaii, where I was talking to someone at the last show in Vegas that we were at. He said, recycling in Hawaii, this was news to me, and if it's false, then you can blame this guy, not me. He said, recycling doesn't really exist out here. We don't have recycling plants. Recycle to do what, right? It's not a magic blue bin that you throw the plastic in there and you're making the world a better place. The recycling bin is only good if it then converts into other products. So if they're not manufacturing much in Hawaii, what's happening to all this plastic? It's ending up in oceans, it's ending up all over the place. So they love the idea of home composting. They said, this is revolutionary, this actually makes sense. And hopefully we'll be able to roll that out with somebody there once we figure out the barrier property side of things. But I would say that truthfulness, and I think it's encouraging news for all of us if that's going to happen.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was great. Audience, go ahead. Alvin?
So my main question is, everyone on the panel is constantly talking about how to be more efficient and more eco-friendly and things like that. But I'd love to get everyone's input, including yours, on what role regulation is playing in this. The regulations that we, or myself as a retailer, how many times I need to put something in a package before it seems safe, between, growing indoors versus outdoors and the regulation. I really think a big hurdle here is regulation. I just want to get everyone's input from that standpoint.
Well, I'll start it off. So for me, when it comes to regulation, I think it's unfortunately we need to have it because not everyone will do it just because it's a good thing. But with that being said, when you're putting those regulations together, if everyone at the table doesn't have a clear understanding of the reason why we need to do this, some of it can be watered down to the point where it's not effective. So for me, I like to educate and empower people to understand the reason why they need to do something and to be able to make the decision to do it on their own with the method that they think works best for their particular situation. But again, not everybody will do that, so we do need regulation, but I always just get considered that, I always worry that when it comes to our building code standards, when it comes to a lot of the things that we work with, it's always the minimum. It's what's the bare minimum that we'll get through without causing a lot of waves. And I worry about that. So if we, as people, as humanity, as human beings on this earth, understand why we need to do it, some of us will probably go above and beyond.
Yeah, I think it's, I would agree with that and say, I think the regulation, because it's happening in packaging. There's places banning single-use plastics. There's, which I think is positive on one side, but it might, what if that triples your packaging costs or makes it extremely inefficient? So you have the, it's a larger question about positive regulation versus over-regulation. I think the regulation can be a nudge in the right direction, but if it's not fully embraced and it's not thought about, let's say in the packaging example, then someone's going to do the bare minimum just to meet the requirement, and maybe they don't do single-use plastics, but they do something equally as harmful, as opposed to getting through the message, which is we really need to figure something out that actually makes sense. So maybe the regulation's a nudge in the right direction, but I'm not sure it's going to ultimately be the answer.
Can I add something to that regulations? My company, I think, is in a unique position because everything that we do is under the lens of social equity, because we're advocates for small business and for social equity. So it's conflicting for me because I do believe in sustainability. I do think that it is something that we need to focus on right now. But every additional regulation that you have, that's another barrier for small business. So it's a complicated issue. And I also wish that we as business owners could make the final call, but truly that's your investors, your board of directors, they have just as much say sometimes. So it's very complicated. I don't think there's one easy answer all the way through.
Noni, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that there is a social equity need here and a foundation. I think broadly, the regulation needs to be holistic. If a policymaker has a goal that they want to implement, such as keeping odors from escaping the building or from keeping product from getting in the hands of children, they need to think about what are the unintended consequences of those decisions. For example, odor control requirements. They mandate a super tight seal envelope, which may or may not be the best from an energy perspective, from a performance perspective. But that's basically what's driven the industry indoors, these closed boxes. So you need to have a policy that is holistic, that takes into account the big picture. Again, on the energy piece, the DOER said, okay, you need to have a lighting power density standard, which basically requires LED to some extent, although I think you're seeing some flexibility there. as a definition can be, gets played with a little bit. But by basically forcing one type of lighting technology, does that therefore mean that HVAC isn't going to factor into that? So the whole building performance, isn't a question. It's just are you picking apart certain technologies and certain aspects of the building? They have to be working well, but as a whole, they're working less efficiently together. So I think that's something that policymakers need to really be thinking about.
So just one aspect that's coming up is a net zero energy code, which again, if and when it's implemented, will have an impact obviously on new construction, and what that will mean for across this industry will be interesting. But again, everybody will be dealing with that same effort, and certainly net zero is for new construction across the board is certainly an excellent goal. So we'll see how that helps support more sustainable buildings.
Is that net zero from an operational standpoint, or the totality, including the construction in and of itself?
The building is supposed to operate at a net zero.
Thank you. You have another question? Second one?
Yeah, so I'm the inventory manager at a dispensary, and when we first started, one of our big sellers was pre-rolls. Anyone in the industry kind of knows, why. And early on, we realized that, we didn't want to become the nips of, the cannabis world, where there's nips on the side of the road. We don't want to see plastic pre-roll tubes on the side of the road. So with some research, we did find a company that does sell hemp-based pre-roll tubes. But my question is for Michael, where is the technology as far as your company goes with offering compostable, to your point, pre-roll packaging or flower packaging?
I would say it's very much on the cutting edge. We're vetting we've probably talked to whoever put the raw material into that tube, we've probably spoken to. And our model when we look at a new raw material is we want to verify the claims, just something practical for you, I would say verify the claims of the individuals, because a lot of people are going to give you poor information about how fast things compost and what percentage of hemp there is and so on and so forth. So I think you need to verify the claims and then make sure it's going to perform the same way so that pre-rolls don't dry out, and then also that there's safety, there's no leaching or no effect. But to speak to that directly, I think the home composting, I'd be curious what it is, and I have to see it, whether it's something that just degrades the plastic or whether it's truly compostable. Is it BPI certified? Is it, you'd want to look at the regulations, and you'd want to look at, is the product itself compostable, or is just the resin it's made from compostable? Because you can imagine, hope I'm not giving too granular detail, but sometimes the resin itself will compost, but if you make it very large or it's very dense, then it's not going to actually compost in a composting cycle. So I don't want to look at the details of that. Are you with Basque?
Yeah.
How do you like the new pre-roll boxes, the new packs?
Can't wait to get them on the shelf.
All right, there you go. We're proud of that one. So that's a movement away from the plastics. But let's talk about the singles, and I'll show you what we're working on. Cool.
Anyone else question?
I got a question for Michael too, for the packaging. Where is it manufactured?
So it's a combination of our U.S. facility and our Asia facility.
Okay. So is that for different compounds, or is it just depending on the order size, it would go overseas versus domestic?
It's really the product and where the infrastructure is. So our business, which is in the fashion industry, unfortunately, when all the fashion product moved overseas, we basically had to move there. We're a second generation family business. So people used to say, oh, your father, he was such an innovator going to China. And his story is, my children and my wife needed to eat, and I would have gone out of business had we not gone over. So we have plans to move things back here, and I'm aware of that. I want to make the product as close to the end consumer as possible. So.
Yeah, I ask because I come from apparel, and I'm trying to get out of it
so you're
because of the
same.
waste. I hate it.
All right, let's talk cannabis back.
It's terrible. So my God, I'm so excited about the opportunity to do something sustainable, because what we do is inherently creating waste at such an astronomical level. It's hard to sleep at night. So I'm like hyper vigilant about wanting to make sure everything I do is ecological or like environmentally friendly.
Mm-hmm. I think just my advice for someone like you who has your heart in the right place where you can do something great is don't get I see people, they go too far on the side, and I'm saying this from a good place here. It's too far on the side of the doom and gloom, and it becomes like fear, and then you can't do anything about it, as opposed to saying, this is screwed up, and I want to be part of the solution, and here's what I'm going to do. So I'd say, like, be concerned and let that concern lead you to action, and don't have that, like, you know, that doom and gloom sort of fear, is my personal perspective for what it's worth.
Cool.
Right in the back, hand up, sorry. I'll let you jump back in.
I was saying, I think the apparel story is really interesting and kind of a nice parallel, because the data is an important part of understanding kind of what the impact is in the industry. I remember reading an article about how the apparel industry is particularly bad about tracking its impact in that regard. So I think cannabis is the same thing. So if you're looking at a grow facility, you want to make sure that you understand exactly how much power is going into it, and when it's being used, and track every kind of ounce of waste, of water coming in, and nutrients and waste coming out. Again, and look at that meticulously, just from a perspective about the importance of data and data analysis.
Yeah, I guess my comment question is, given we're talking about environment and apparel, I think the not so dirty secret about the vertically integrated Massachusetts model for growing cannabis, and we're talking about a plant that's basically imprisoned, the amount of waste that the industry is responsible for at this point in time is simply astounding. And greening up the industry, I think, is going to be an enormous opportunity. Without becoming cynical, what are the positive solutions to so much plastic and things that could be recycled from indoor grows that are simply going to landfills, for instance? So there's very little in the industry at this point that is compostable, or even the things that could be composted are not being composted. So the opportunities to become more environmentally correct in the cannabis sphere at this point are simply astounding. And I got the first outdoor grow in the state in Sheffield, and it was such a long haul, proving that I could do this securely and do it qualitatively in such a way that people have the confidence that a plant like this could be grown outdoors. Amazing. And organically, no less. So, but even doing this outdoor grow, I'm astounded with the amount of plastic, the metric tags, the plastic friggin' gloves that we're throwing out on my farm at this point. So it is a little depressing, because the sphere I came from growing greens organically, everything was compostable. Well, I should say much of it. There was no waste stream. And there wasn't a whole, the plastic bags I used bothered me greatly. But that leads me to hemp. Everybody's running to CBD. We know that fiber ultimately is all about packaging. And we do have an enormous opportunity to start shifting the cannabis conversation towards natural fibers that truly break down, assimilate, and become part of the cycles of existence and life again. So until we start having these rational discussions, and that cannabis is part of the plastic problem, and that the grows are not net zero. In fact, they're incredibly wasteful and energy consumptive on all fronts. I think the industry's got to look in the mirror right now and go, holy shit, we've created a Frankenstein. So, and it's not piecemeal either. It's looking at the whole picture of how we're doing this, and knowing that it could be grown organically in greenhouses, outdoors. Outdoors is about breeding. And we've been doing a fairly good job, those of us who have been breaking the rules in the past and growing outdoors very successfully, and breeding varieties that are mold and mildew resistant. We need to be having this conversation about growing things regeneratively, organically, outdoors, and in now I use the word sustainable greenhouse operations.
Thank you very much. I'm going to allow the panel a chance to respond to that, because
Sure.
the topic of this is, are we really green? And I kind of shake my head and go, no.
No.
So go ahead, guys.
I'd love to jump in on this one. So first of all, I love outdoor grows. I'm so happy to hear about your operation in Sheffield. But I also, just for the other growers in the room, growing is fun, and if you grow indoors, there shouldn't be anything that says that you can't grow indoors either. I have so much fun with environmental controls and relative humidity and vapor pressure deficit, and making our grow like a makerspace. So we have liquid-cooled LEDs that we reposition to use as our to warm our root zones. So we also claim our condensate, so we're minimizing our water use by like 70%. So there are different ways to do it. I do think this industry needs to look at itself for a lot of reasons, sustainability being one of them. But I do want to share with you maybe a positive story about a vertical integration. So my last grow was the largest medical grow in New York, and it was vertically integrated. We're going through so much plastic. We're using HP Pro Mix and 3-gallon plastic pails, and I really wanted to move away from that. So it took maybe 4 months, full harvest, to lay out the ROI for using cocoa with compostable bags. Part of the way that I did that was, well, this is how much we're costing with these 3-gallon pots. Let's actually wash the pot. So I'll use my cultivation team as dishwashers. So I'll show you how much it costs to the labor to actually reuse this plastic versus what we can save in bulk by buying these compostable bags from Rio Coco. So it is a very complex issue. There are a lot of things that you personally, in whatever facet of the industry that we work in, can take initiatives to. I'm going to bring it back to why I had to take 4 months to do it, why I had to show the budget and the ROI. Ultimately, you can't do anything unless your investors or your board of directors agrees with you. So take the initiative, give it a try, be creative.
Any other questions?
Can we talk about water reuse? I think that's a big thing that I don't see really a front runner on a system. It's something that helps developers to design, permit, and construct grow facilities. And especially if it's on a septic system, which I'm finding more and more of these are having to be on if they want to go to land that's affordable and in communities that have agreements available to them. They're almost forced to come up with some type of recycle system, and it seems almost custom. I don't see anybody out there in the industry that's got frankly, a system you can plug and play, or come up with a good way to reuse the condensator you mentioned, or even some of the irrigation or anything. It's obviously a big cost, and you want to try to reuse as much water as you can. Do you see anything innovative coming out on that side?
I think maybe Sam is the best person to answer this with the current work that he's doing, but I'll just tell you what we're doing. We're reclaiming our condensate, and we have to run it through an RO system, a reverse osmosis system, to reintroduce back into our grow. But to your point, it is very piecemeal. We have to put everything together to make it work.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Noni. It is, I think your observations are spot on. There's not really, a tried and true, plug-and-play, come water, solution out there. For me, energy seems to have gotten the most attention, on this. And people, say, okay, well, we're growing indoors, which is inherently, more water efficient than growing outdoors. This is the way the outdoors is. Been treated, the West Coast, for example, where there's a lot of water. So folks are saying, okay, well, that's kind of, we're okay then on the water piece. But you're right, kind of, capturing the condensation, I think is a part of the solution people have been doing. And kind of hand watering versus automatic watering. I think people are trying to figure out kind of which is the best approach. And again, I think it's the important piece, I think, is is for folks to be really kind of counting how much of the water's coming in and what's going out, kind of having to account for the best use of that resource. But yeah, it's very custom at this point. And Massachusetts requires to get DEP approval if you're going to go above a certain level of wastewater, which forces people to be creative. But I think it'll be interesting to hear what you say about talk later perhaps, but how folks are kind of are working with or around these regulations, because I know that the DEP is on top of everybody. So that's a good question.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I want to just give everybody give each of the panelists just a quick few seconds to tell everyone how they can reach you, if they have questions, where can they find you, LinkedIn, what's your website, all that stuff. So Michael, if you go first, and then we'll go down the line.
Yeah, ContempoPackaging.com, Instagram @Contempo Specialty, or the Cannabis Packaging Show on YouTube. Maybe it's the best one.
It's really good.
We have a series on green packaging if you want to learn more about it.
Cool.
So you can reach us at 4treesma.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, 4treesma. We'll also be submitting at the New England Harvest Cup. So, I'm sorry, any can harvest cup. So that's our next big thing.
Yeah, my umbrella company is called Climate Resources Group. You can kind of find me at that name, on various media. But my cannabis service company is called Enlighten Your Grow. So you can find me at enlightenyourgrow.com, and so look me up there.
And company's website is GRL Architects. I do have some cards here, and I'm only on LinkedIn, sorry.
And I'm Asia Atwood, and you can find out more about me at asiaatwood.com. Thank you everyone for your attention, for your time, for your questions, the dialogue. It was great. Hope you learned something from it, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.